The Galactic Integration Academy on Valoris Prime had welcomed its first human student 3 weeks ago, and Instructor Xal'Tor had decided, almost immediately, that he did not like her. Her name was Sergeant First Class Mara Okafor, retired, technically, though nothing about her carried retirement. She was 29 years old, 5 feet 7 inches tall, and built like a compressed spring. She had applied to the Academy's Advanced Combat Doctrine program on scholarship, one of 12 seats offered to frontier species as a diplomatic gesture. The council had expected to fill the human seat with a diplomat's child, someone polished and manageable. They got Mara instead. She sat in the front row of the combat theory chamber every morning. She asked questions that made the other students shift uncomfortably. She corrected Xal'Tor twice in the first week, once on the historical record of the Karathi suppression, once on wound classification terminology, and both times she was right. Xal'Tor was a Thurvian. His species stood 2.5 meters tall, trilaterally symmetrical, with 3 long arms and a neck that could rotate 320 degrees. On their homeworld, Thurvians were apex predators. They had built their civilization on the bones of 7 other species and considered themselves the galaxy's foremost authorities on combat instruction. He had taught at this academy for 19 years. He had broken 3 students. Metaphorically, he always told the review board, and shaped hundreds more. He did not appreciate being corrected by a creature that barely reached his ribcage. The breaking point came during week 4. Live sparring began on a Monday. The chamber was a wide oval of impact-absorbing floors, ringed by observation benches where the rest of the class sat watching. Each pairing was chosen by Xal'Tor personally. He called the matches with the deliberate theatrics of someone who had rehearsed authority for 2 decades. He called Mara's name last. Okafor. He gestured to the center circle with one long arm. You will demonstrate a defensive posture for the class. Mara walked out without rushing. She wore the standard academy training suit, gray, fitted, no padding. She stood in the center, feet shoulder-width apart, hands loose at her sides. Xal'Tor circled her slowly. The class watched in silence. The other students, Calorian, Thurvian adjacent, 2 Marshborn Quilii, understood this dynamic perfectly. The instructor was establishing hierarchy. It was a common first session ritual. Your species is young, Xal'Tor said loudly enough for the class to hear. Physically limited. Single plane symmetry. 1 heart. Bones that shatter under moderate force. He stopped in front of her. You do not belong in advanced combat doctrine. Mara said nothing. Her eyes tracked him without blinking. Show me your guard, he said. She raised her hands. The posture was compact, elbows down, chin tucked. A practiced observer would have noticed how balanced her weight was over her feet. Xal'Tor was not looking for balance. He was looking for an excuse. He found one. Too narrow, he said. He stepped forward and shoved her left shoulder hard, the kind of correction an instructor might give, technically, but with twice the force required. Mara absorbed the push. She shifted 1 inch and reset. The class stirred. That shove would have sent a Quilii sprawling. Xal'Tor's neck rotated. He looked at the students, then back at her. Something behind his eyes made a decision. Again, he said, you are not listening. He swung his primary arm in a backhand strike toward her head. What happened next lasted approximately 1.4 seconds. Mara's head dropped below the swing. Her left hand caught his forearm on the follow-through, not stopping it, but redirecting it, past her, slightly downward, using his own rotational momentum. Her right hand was already moving. She drove the heel of her palm into the bridge of his nasal cartilage. The crack was loud enough to echo. Xal'Tor's third arm shot out reflexively. She was already out from under it. She stepped to his outside, swept the rear leg joint. Thurvian anatomy had a vulnerable knee analog that no one outside their species was supposed to know about, and let gravity handle the rest. 240 kilograms of apex predator combat. Instructor hit the floor face first. The class did not make a sound. Mara stood over him. She was breathing slightly harder than before. Her expression had not changed. Xal'Tor pushed himself upright with 2 arms, the third hanging wrong at the shoulder. Blood was running freely down the front of his face. His nasal ridge had collapsed on the left side. He was making a sound that, on Thurvian, meant something between pain and disbelief. He looked up at her. Mara looked down at him. You executed a combat strike on a student without consent or protective gear, she said quietly. I responded under Article 14 of the Academy's Engagement Charter. Defensive force in response to unsanctioned physical aggression. She tilted her head slightly. I can cite the subsection if you'd like. The review convened in 48 hours. Instructor Xal'Tor filed a complaint first. He used words like disproportionate response and animal reflex and threat to institutional order. He did not mention that he had swung at her face. The observation room had cameras. Academy Arbiter Sinqual watched the footage 3 times. She was Calorian, old enough to have seen 17 species inducted into galactic civilization, wise enough to recognize what she was watching. On the 3rd viewing, she paused at the moment Mara's palm connected. Not because it was brutal, because it was precise. The angle, the timing, the controlled transfer of force. It was not a panic response. It was not animal instinct. It was applied biomechanical knowledge executed under stress in under a second. She called in the Academy's xenobiological consultant, a Marshquilii named Privotin, who had spent 40 years studying frontier species. Is this typical? Sinqual asked, playing the footage. Privotin watched it twice. For a human veteran with her documented service history? Yes. He paused. Sergeant Okafor served 8 years in a planetary defense unit on a Class 4 Deathworld. Seismic instability, megafauna contact, 3 live combat deployments against external incursion. She looked small. They all look small, Privotin said. That's the mistake everyone makes. He pointed at the screen. Notice she did not escalate beyond what was necessary to neutralize the threat. She stopped when he was down. Controlled response. That is not the behavior of a creature acting on instinct. That is discipline. Sinqual was quiet for a long moment. Pull Instructor Xal'Tor's full record, she said. The hearing was brief. 3 prior incidents of unsanctioned physical contact with students over 19 years. 2 settlement agreements. 1 informal reprimand that had been filed and forgotten. Xal'Tor had never struck a student who could effectively respond, which was why the pattern had survived this long. Mara sat across the table from the review panel in her regular clothes. She had brought nothing with her except her Academy identification card and a handwritten timeline of the incident on one side of a note card. Sinqual asked her if she had anything to say. I want to finish the course, Mara said. That's all. Sinqual looked at her for a long moment. You are aware that you broke his nasal ridge, dislocated his secondary shoulder joint, and fractured his knee analog. Yes. With your hands. Yes. He outweighs you by 170 kilograms. Mara nodded. He made the mistake of assuming weight was the variable that mattered. One of the junior panel members, a young Thurvian, made a sound that might have been a laugh, quickly suppressed. Xal'Tor was placed on indefinite administrative leave pending full review of his conduct record. The 2 prior students who had reached settlement agreements were contacted. Mara was reassigned to a new instructor, a quiet Calorian veteran named Yasvel, who had fought in 4 wars and lost 3 fingers on his dominant hand. He had reviewed the footage before their first session. When Mara walked into the chamber, he bowed slightly. She bowed back. They spent the first hour not sparring. They drank something warm that Yasvel brewed in a small clay pot, and they talked about pressure, what it felt like in the moment before a decision had to be made, how the body remembered things the mind had stopped thinking about, how discipline and instinct were not opposites, but the same thing trained over time until they merged. At the end of the session, Yasvel said, Your species has been fighting longer than most of this Academy's faculty has been alive. Mara wrapped her hands slowly. Long enough. Does it bother you, he asked, that they still underestimate you? She considered this for a moment. Outside the high window, the twin moons of Valoris Prime were rising, pale and enormous against a violet sky that smelled faintly of something she couldn't name. It used to, she said. Now I just think of it as a tactical advantage. Yasvel smiled. The Calorian expression for it was subtle, a narrowing of the secondary eyelids, and poured another cup. Welcome to the Academy, Sergeant Okafor, he said. I think you are going to do well here. Asterisk in the observation logs of the Galactic Academy. The incident was filed under case reference 7 Gamma. Unsanctioned aggression, student response classified justified. The footage was later used in a revised faculty training module titled, Know Your Students Before You Raise Your Hand. Asterisk. It ran every semester after that. Asterisk Instructor Xal'Tor did not return.